So we have another update when it comes to WrestleMania 37 in April, and according to latest reports, WrestleMania 37 will not feature 3 major WWE stars. Now we are less than 4 weeks away from WWE's biggest show of the year, WrestleMania 37. Of course, it's set to take place across 2 nights on April 10 and April 11, 2021 at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay, Florida. The show will feature the return of live fans in attendance, but they might not get to witness some of the biggest WWE superstars in action this year. Now, according to Dave Meltzer on the latest Wrestling Observer radio show, several major stars, including the likes of WWE Hall of Famer Goldberg, The Undertaker, and Brock Lesnar, will not be a part of WrestleMania 37 this year. Meltzer said, quote, "No Goldberg, no Undertaker, no Lesnar, so you've taken some of the biggest attractions off and Edge does not replace them." Now, first of all, I will carry on with the report there in a second, but you can't have your cake and eat it, right? This is such a ridiculous statement, I think, from Dave Meltzer, and I'm not one of those people that constantly just bashes everything he says. I think when it comes to WWE and with certain other companies, you have to take what he says with a pinch of salt. Like, this is kind of the problem when it comes to, I guess, wrestling journalism. With some people, I don't want to throw everyone in there because I know a lot of really good wrestling journalists, but with certain journalists, there is obviously a huge sense of bias to what they say. And when it comes to Dave Meltzer, maybe for justified reasons in his mind, he does have a certain slant when he talks about WWE. I think that's a fair criticism. And the quote there saying, "No Goldberg, no Undertaker, no Lesnar, so you've taken some of the biggest attractions off and Edge has not replaced them." Well, what do you want? Because this comes back to criticizing just for the sake of criticism. And that's sometimes what Dave Meltzer does, and certainly sometimes what social media does. You can't tell me if Goldberg, The Undertaker, and Brock Lesnar was on WrestleMania 37 this year, along with Edge, right? You would have the criticisms of, oh, look at all these part-time talents on the show. Look at all of these old guys coming in for a couple of dates of the year, or look at these old guys coming in for this big spot. You know, Goldberg's only wrestled 1 match against Drew McIntyre. His second match will be at WrestleMania, then he'll disappear. The Undertaker, always in his 50s. He just retired. That was a short retirement. He comes back in. He comes back for WrestleMania. Brock Lesnar, oh wait, he was out of contract for 1 year and he wrestled at WrestleMania. Now he comes back just at one more WrestleMania. We probably won't see him till SummerSlam, blah, blah, blah. Edge, another old guy. I mean, people complained about Edge winning the Royal Rumble, and he's pretty much been on TV every single week since. And you can't complain if they are going to be there, which is what he would do, and it's what everyone would do, of having all of these older stars, part-time stars, whatever you want to call them. There would be so much criticism of having them on these shows, right? They would say Goldberg, Undertaker, Lesnar, oh, I can't believe they're all on these shows. It's just terrible, terrible. You can't have them not be on the show and hear that, no, there's going to be no Goldberg, no Undertaker, no Brock Lesnar, and then still complain, going, oh, there's no stars on the show. I can't believe there's no stars, and you haven't replaced them. I mean, what do you want? It's like that GIF says, isn't it? What do you want? You know, say what do you want? Because this has to be seen as an opportunity, right? If you want to look at things from a positive stance here, you go, okay, there is no Goldberg, there is no Undertaker. There shouldn't be any Undertaker, by the way, because he's retired. Goldberg, I have no problem with Goldberg not being on that show. Brock Lesnar, Brock Lesnar is an attraction. I'm not one of those people that criticizes Brock Lesnar for only showing up a couple of times a year. He's an attraction. That's the deal he made. Big deal. He's still got a ton to offer. But regardless, you can't, you got to look at that and say, right, there is no Goldberg, no Undertaker, no Brock Lesnar. Surely that is not a bad thing, because every single superstar, or most of the superstars, certainly that are on that WrestleMania card this year, will have been talents that have been there all year round. It should be the full-time superstars that are the main attractions on that show. That's how you build new stars. That's how you elevate stars to the next level. When it comes to the biggest and best WrestleManias of all time, the WrestleManias in the Attitude Era and in the Ruthless Aggression Era, some of those great shows, they featured matches with superstars that were going to be there on the Raws and SmackDown for the rest of the year. That's what it's going to be like with WrestleMania 37 this year. That's how you establish new stars. You put them in positions so that they can succeed. You put them in positions where they can elevate themselves to the next level. Bobby Lashley's a great example of this. Bobby Lashley right now, he's the WWE champion. He's probably going to be defending his championship against Drew McIntyre at WrestleMania. If Brock Lesnar, if Goldberg, if The Undertaker was on that show, who's to say Bobby Lashley would be WWE champion right now? They'd probably go with Brock Lesnar versus Drew McIntyre again. And we saw that last year. I know we didn't see it in front of fans and all that kind of stuff, but we saw that last year. Instead, we're getting Bobby Lashley versus Drew McIntyre. Yes, we saw it at Backlash last year, but we can elevate Bobby Lashley to a next level. Bobby Lashley's going to be there on Raw the week after, and the week after that, and the week after that, and the Raw 6 months later, and the Raw 12 months later. That's how you make stars. And I know Bobby Lashley's in his 40s, but at least he's going to be there year round. So I don't have a problem with any of those stars not appearing on the show. And I think people that criticise that they won't be on the show, saying, well, you've got no stars, then what do you want? Really, what do you want from WWE, right? Because you would complain either way. Now, other than these three, WrestleMania 37 will reportedly also not feature John Cena, Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey. The absence of multiple massive names could hurt the pay-per-view, as fans would have loved to see them all in action. Now, John Cena not appearing there, I know people will still be slightly skeptical about that, and you never know. You never know. I think obviously he's filming the Peacemaker TV series for HBO Max right now, and that's in Vancouver in Canada, and obviously flying in from Canada to the United States. There's a quarantine period, and it's just very difficult, isn't it? Because you would have to come in, quarantine for 2 weeks, do the WrestleMania shot, go back, quarantine for another 2 weeks. You're talking about shutting down a major production. Even if it's a television production, it's essentially a film production. Shutting down a major production for a month. And they won't do that for John Cena to appear at WrestleMania. They just won't. I mean, budgets are tight just generally now, let alone for something like that for HBO Max. So I agree. I don't see John Cena appearing at WrestleMania unless, of course, he hasn't been completely truthful and transparent about when these dates do finish and when his shoot does finish. If it finishes early enough, then obviously it's a possibility, but I just don't see the John Cena one. The Becky Lynch one, I think it's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, of course, she gave birth in December, and April, 4 months after giving birth, it's a massive ask. It's a massive, massive ask. I think people, there was a faction of people, there was a group of people, and this was ludicrous, but there was a group of people that genuinely, and I'm not exaggerating here, thought pretty much guaranteed she was going to be at the Royal Rumble at the end of January. And I think, mostly rational people said, are you crazy? I mean, this woman gave birth like weeks ago, so there is no chance. There is no chance. The physical toll it takes on the body to do that, and obviously, and then all of the changes that happens after that. I mean, you're still looking after your child, and I think when it comes to Becky Lynch, there should be no rush for her to return. Obviously, she is going to return. In what form, we don't know. At WrestleMania, could she show up? I think she could absolutely show up. Is she going to wrestle? I would be stunned. I would be absolutely stunned, quite frankly. Could she show up? That's absolutely a possibility. On the night, we talk about these WrestleMania moments, don't we, all the time, and WrestleMania cameos and people returning, whether it is for one night, a surprise entrance, all that kind of stuff. I could see that happening. I wouldn't rule out Becky Lynch appearing at the show. Is she going to wrestle? I don't see it. Ronda Rousey, it's a really confusing one with her, isn't it? It's a really confusing one with her and her WWE status, because she signed a 3-year deal with WWE back in 2018, a 3-year deal, and it was a full-time deal, and she did 1 year. And I know obviously she stepped away because she wanted to start a family. I think the pandemic does really play into it, because I think the working idea was she was going to do a year and she was going to take some time away, possibly to start a family or just even have some time off. I mean, this is someone that's been in competition since she was a kid, whether it's judo and then the Olympics and then MMA and then pro wrestling. She never stopped. And she's a massive star. And so I think the idea probably was that she was going to be resting for a year for WWE. She would step away and then she would return in 2020 around the time of WrestleMania 36 or something like that. That was probably the plan. Then, of course, the pandemic happens, everything shuts down, and then I think for a variety of reasons she hasn't returned since. Maybe because she doesn't feel comfortable performing in the pandemic. We don't know her opinions about it. Also, it might be a case of the Brock Lesnar syndrome with WWE as well, where they go, you know what, Ronda Rousey is an expensive performer. I don't know if Ronda Rousey is getting a check from WWE every single month. You would assume since she's under contract she would be, but maybe they've come to an agreement where that's not going to happen. I don't know. I don't know. You also have to factor in that WWE has added time onto people's contracts through injury or through anything like that. Who's to say that they won't do the same with Ronda Rousey? So is she going to appear at WrestleMania? I really don't know. I thought she would probably return last year. I don't know if it's been confirmed yet that there were plans for her to return. I know that there were some rumblings that maybe she was scheduled to make an appearance at WrestleMania 36 last year. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Could she show up? Maybe. Again, I think it depends on her feelings of performing it during the pandemic and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I think out of those three names, Cena, Lynch and Rousey, I think Becky Lynch is Quite likely. I really wouldn't be stunned if she shows up at WrestleMania in April. Is she going to wrestle? No, I don't see that happening. But when it comes to, I don't know, Charlotte Flair, if she wins her match for the Raw Women's Championship, or maybe even the Bianca Belair, Sasha Banks, who knows? Who knows? I really wouldn't be stunned if that happened. Or who knows? Maybe they might announce in the next couple of weeks that Becky Lynch is the host or something like that. I mean, that's a possibility. Anything's a possibility right now. So that certainly is interesting. When it comes to this narrative, though, as I mentioned, that because they're not going to be featuring these stars, because we're not going to get Goldberg, because we're not going to get The Undertaker, because we're not going to get Brock Lesnar or John Cena or Becky Lynch or Ronda Rousey, that makes it less of a WrestleMania. I disagree. Now, obviously, they are big names. They are big names, regardless of if they're there all the time or not. They are big names. And I don't know if WrestleMania would be easier to sell or not with them being on the card, but at this point, and I do kind of subscribe to this sort of theory at this point. Back in the day, and for most other pay-per-views around the year, you do tune in depending on what the card is and what the main event is and what certain matches are on the card. When it comes to WrestleMania, I just don't know if you tune in for the matches, if that as crazy as that seems at this point anymore. You tune in because it's WrestleMania. I think people buy tickets to go to the show because it's WrestleMania. Obviously, if there are these ginormous matches that transcend time, and I'm talking about Hogan Rock or The Rock John Cena or those kind of matches that you thought, oh my gosh, well, I mean, this is incredible. These matches will never happen once in a lifetime, right? It was twice in a lifetime when it came to Rock and Cena. But my point being that these matches that you thought were just impossible and they were never going to happen or weren't even possible, then maybe that does drive an extra interest. But ultimately, I think fans tune in for WrestleMania. I think fans buy tickets for WrestleMania. I think fans sign up to the network or Peacock to watch WrestleMania. If there's a great main event, great. If there are big stars on the card, great. If not, I think people tune in regardless. I really do. So does maybe Goldberg and also, and this is a good point as well, you have to factor in of the year that everyone has had. You know, fans are just going to be glad, and again, I don't know if I was in the Orlando area or the Florida area rather, if I would go to the show. I don't know how comfortable I would feel, but if fans have been starved from going to a WWE show for over 12 months at this point, or when it comes to WrestleMania, it will certainly be over 12 months at this point, are they going to go to see the card, or are they going to go because it's WrestleMania? I think it's the latter. I don't think having no Goldberg, no Undertaker, no Brock Lesnar, no John Cena, no Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, yes, they're big names, but I don't think that's going to really be a factor in WWE's inability to sell out every night. I think they'll easily sell out every night, and I think lots of people will tune into the network because it's WrestleMania and because there's going to be crowds in attendance, and they're going to see what WWE is going to do. And again, I think almost WWE are in a unique position this year in the sense that the card's kind of secondary. You know, people are going to be tuning in for the spectacle. People are going to be tuning in for the return of the live fans. People are going to be tuning in for this big reset of WWE, and they're going to be tuning in to see some surprises as well. So I think if there was any year that you could say that, you know, not having these big stars isn't a bad thing, it probably would be this year. And as I mentioned earlier on, it's probably a good thing in the sense that you're giving yourself the opportunity to actually establish and build some new stars. And maybe it might look like a weak card, but maybe in a couple of years' time, because you gave these full-time stars this opportunity to have this big WrestleMania spotlight, in a couple of years, you might look back at this WrestleMania 37 card and go, wow, what a card that is. It's stacked with, you know, with legends and icons at this point, and they really got this big opportunity to flourish and star in the build-up to WrestleMania or at WrestleMania 37 itself. So again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing, and who knows, we still might get a Becky Lynch appearance, we might get a Ronda Rousey appearance. We don't know what's going to go on with The Undertaker right now. Of course, The Undertaker's retired, so I don't think he's going to wrestle or anything like that. Could he show up on the show? Absolutely. I mean, look at the WrestleMania surprises we've seen in recent years. Hulk Hogan showed up. There was a rumor, by the way, when it comes to WrestleMania 36, and I think the reports are out there, so you should be able to find them with a quick Google search, but there was reports last year that before, obviously, the pandemic and everything got moved to the Performance Center in front of no fans, that Hulk Hogan was scheduled to win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal in 2020. I'm not joking. So the idea that people can go, oh, there's no Undertaker, all that kind of stuff, the Undertaker could absolutely make an appearance and chokeslam someone. Who knows? I mean, we don't know if the Undertaker's going to be in the Hall of Fame this year. Personally, I think it'll probably be next year because WrestleMania's in Texas. But just because Dave Meltzer says no Goldberg, no Undertaker, no Lesnar, who knows? And if Brock Lesnar does indeed come back to WWE, maybe he'll show up on the day of the event. There's still time to go. We're still about 4 weeks away. And if WWE is showing us anything right now, is that they don't make their mind up on anything to the last minute. So Goldberg, Undertaker, Lesnar, John Cena, Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, anything will happen between now and WrestleMania as well. And if they don't show up again, people are tuning in for WrestleMania. I don't think they're tuning in for Goldberg or Brock Lesnar or anything like that. So WWE probably get away with it this year. But of course, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on some big names not being available or not being featured at WrestleMania 37 this year? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Impact Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.